After the events on Mustafar, Darth Vader's life became a desert of anguish and rage. With every step he took inside his armor, he felt the weight of the choices he had made, the lives he had taken, and the soul he had lost. The missions assigned to him by Palpatine, however grand and ruthless they were nothing more than excuses to drown out his own screams. Amidst devastated planets and the bodies of fallen Jedi, he relived with cruel clarity the moment he turned against his former allies, young apprentices, and even innocent civilians who crossed his path. At night, immersed in the suffocating silence of his meditation chamber, flashes of his battle with Obi-Wan appeared with brutal clarity. The heat of the lava, the blue glow of the lightsabers, the cry of pain, and the shadow of Padmé crying in his mind. He knew, though he tried not to admit it, that this violence was not just a reflection of his loyalty to the Empire, but a self-imposed punishment. Yoda's words still echoed in his distant past. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. And that was exactly what he had left. Suffering. Anakin Skywalker had not been destroyed only by the Jedi or Palpatine, but by his own inability to cope with the pain of loss. He believed he had done everything to save Padmé, but all he had achieved was her condemnation and his own. Deep down, he hated what he had become. Not a savior, but an executioner, a specter longing for what he once was. During one of his many missions to exterminate the last echoes of the Jedi Order, Vader landed in the Lothal system. He expected only to find resistance and ruins, but what he found was an ancient silence, permeated with an unusual vibration in the Force. Amid the deserts carved by time, he located a forgotten temple, hidden by the planet's own will. As he touched the walls marked with arcane symbols, he felt something different, a distortion in the normal flow of the Force, as if time did not follow the same rules there. For the first time in years, Vader hesitated. It was not fear, but a curiosity that gnawed at him inside, something Anakin had not felt in a long time. He remained inside that temple for days, ignoring Imperial calls, leaving his officers adrift. The solitude of that ancient chamber was strangely welcoming, as if he had finally found a place where the weight of his armor was less suffocating. He meditated, read the inscriptions, touched the panels, and realized that there was more there than ruins. The Force vibrated unevenly, as if fragments of the past were lurking, trapped in the cracks of time. Slowly, Vader began to understand that the portals were not just symbols. They were actual access points to the fabric of time. And with a mixture of fear and euphoria, he knew he could use them. Study became obsession. With each new symbol deciphered, each new projection activated, Vader delved deeper into that forbidden knowledge. The temple seemed to test him, responding only when his intention was genuine. And at that point, Vader's intention was simple: to return. As he activated the temple's internal mechanisms, he remembered his youth on Tatooine, his innate ability to repair and create. Using ancient technological fragments and parts brought from his own ship, Vader built a portable device, rudimentary but functional, capable of channeling the temple's energy and generating small temporal rifts. When he turned on the device for the first time, he was overwhelmed by a wave of energy and memories. The visions came like an emotional collapse. Padmé, her eyes, her smile, her voice saying that there was still goodness in him. The moments on Naboo, the walks by the lakes, their hands intertwined, the stolen kisses in the corridors. For an instant, time broke, and he could touch her in his memory. And then, when the portal dissolved, Vader remained kneeling, gasping, not for air, but for the return of the pain that had never gone away, only suffocated by steel and anger. It awakened something, a desire buried beneath layers of coldness and servitude, a desire not for power, but for redemption or perhaps reversal. For the first time since Mustafar, Darth Vader did not think of dominating or destroying. He thought of preventing his own mistake, preventing Padmé from dying, preventing the world from breaking the way it had broken. And that thought grew inside him with the same intensity as a lightsaber activated in the dark. The temple had responded to his pain, and now the device was more than a tool. It was an extension of the force that remained in him. Not the dark side, but the side that still begged to be mended. The connection with the artifact became symbiotic. Vader discovered that he no longer needed physical commands to activate the portals. His will, aligned with the Force, was the trigger. The device began to respond to thoughts, emotions, and restrained desires. With effort, he could visualize specific moments from his past, and little by little he mastered the ability to open small windows in time, spying, testing, planning. It was as if the Force itself, albeit reluctantly, was offering him one last chance. Not for victory, but for choice. Each new test brought more painful memories. He saw Mace Windu flying out of the Chancellor's office window. He saw the look of horror on the young Padawans' faces. He saw Palpatine smiling behind every act. He saw himself kneeling before a monster, thinking it was the only way. But above all, he saw Padmé clearer, more present, more alive. And with that, his conviction grew. There was a point, an exact moment when everything began to fall apart, and he needed to return to that point. As he adjusted the coordinates of the time stream, Vader no longer thought about consequences, paradoxes, or prophecies. He thought about Padmé and his son. He thought about their screams. He thought about the despair. He thought about the last time he saw her, fallen on the ramp of the ship, not knowing that it would be the last time. The desire to change that now was greater than his own fear. It was no longer about saving the galaxy, nor about the balance of the Force. It was about a broken man wanting to undo the ruin he had caused with his own hands. And then, in the dim light of the temple, with the artifact pulsing in his hand and destiny hanging in the balance, Darth Vader took his first step back in time. The moment Darth Vader chose to intervene was not random. With his newly acquired mastery over the flow of time, he accurately traced the date when Padmé was still carrying the twins in her womb, shortly before the Senate meeting, and Obi-Wan's suspicions intensified. As he activated his temporal device, reality folded before him like a veil torn by the Force, and in the blink of an eye, Vader appeared silently in Senator Amidala's royal chambers in the heart of Coruscant. The late afternoon light streamed through the balcony and bathed Padmé in a serene golden glow, a stark contrast to the dark figure materializing there, breathing heavily and carrying a weight that was no longer just physical. The shock was immediate. Padmé brought her hands to her belly, instinctively protecting the lives growing inside her. Her eyes widened at the sight of the black-cloaked and masked figure, whose presence seemed to distort the air around him. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling, as if testing a distant memory. But the answer, grave, metallic, and at the same time laden with pain, was enough for her to step back. "Padmé, I came back for you." Her reaction was a direct blow. Vader told her who he was, but it wasn't that easy. He had to use the Force to stop her when she drew her blaster and prepared to attack. But Vader just held her still and asked her to listen to him. Then he told Padmé everything. Everything he remembered, everything he had witnessed, everything he had done, and everything he had become. He told her he was Anakin's future. Anakin would never do that. Anakin would never wear that armor, that presence of terror. "You're not him," said the young woman. That rejection cut deeper than any lightsaber. Knowing that his continued presence there could create an irreversible paradox, Vader looked toward the entrance of the room, sensing in the Force that his younger self was approaching. His heartbeat quickened. They heard footsteps. Padmé was already expecting Anakin. She tried to scream, but Vader knew that time was short and the window was narrow. With no other choice and driven by a confused instinct for preservation and desire, Vader activated the device. A new portal appeared, with incandescent edges and vibrant instability. Amid Padmé's cries of protest, he held her with force, not violence, and they both crossed the veil of time together. A second later, the room was empty, as if it had never been touched. Shortly after Vader's departure, the young Anakin Skywalker arrived in the room. He found the door ajar, the curtains fluttering, and an oppressive feeling in the air. "Padmé?" he called urgently, but received no answer. The crib was still dismantled, her clothes folded on the bed, the hot tea still serving as a witness that she had been there moments ago. But her absence was absolute. The Force screamed inside him that something serious had happened. Anakin searched the Senate, the medical centers, the Jedi temples. Every clue ended in frustration. Anger filled his heart like poison. The only thing he knew was that someone had touched what was most precious to him, and that would not go unpunished. Meanwhile, Padmé woke up in a strange place, surrounded by wild vegetation and ancient architecture she didn't recognize. She was on a remote planet, where Vader believed the temple's presence would not reach them. She was furious. She accused him of being a monster, of kidnapping her. Deep down, she began to believe his words. She began to believe that he was Anakin. Did you really kill the Jedi? Destroy the Republic? Lie to me? She shouted, walking in circles, refusing any contact. Vader remained silent at first, listening to everything as if each word were a necessary judgment. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. But he wasn't there to convince her, he was there to show her. The journey was not made in haste, but with intention. Vader took her through forgotten ruins, uninhabited planets, always creating portals only at points where time was unstable enough to peek into the past without interference. Padmé continued to reject his words, until he, with the device in his hands, opened a fragment of time, a window in the air. There, she saw herself on Naboo, in the flowery field, being touched by Anakin for the first time with true tenderness. Only he would know that, she whispered, frightened. In another window, she saw the secret wedding, with the droid witnesses and whispered vows. Why? She asked, almost in a lament. Because there is still something of me in you, Vader replied, and at that moment, she no longer knew how to respond. With each new portal opened, Vader revealed more fragments of the truth. He showed her the look he had given her before leaving for Mustafar. He showed her the dreams that tormented him about her death. He showed her how, in his fear of losing her, he lost himself. Palpatine used that against me, he confessed, his voice muffled by the mask. Padmé began to hesitate. It wasn't forgiveness. There was still anger, still disbelief. But what had once been utter disgust was now a crack. Because, as much as he wanted to deny it, the man behind the armor knew parts of her soul that no one else had ever touched. She faced him with courage, though. She told him that he had chosen this, that no one had forced him, that even though he was afraid, he could have trusted her. And Vader didn't disagree. At every stop along the journey, she confronted him with truths he himself tried to bury. If you really loved me, you would have listened to me. I loved you so much that I destroyed myself. And these verbal duels were more brutal than any lightsaber. Her presence brought everything to the surface. The loss, the failure, the guilt. But paradoxically, it also rekindled a long-buried hope. With each world, with each memory, Padmé understood that this man was not just a shadow. He was a tomb where Anakin still moaned. Even if she wouldn't admit it, something inside her recognized that lament. She didn't accept it, she didn't embrace it, but she saw it. And that was enough for Vader to continue with his plan. Not to prove his innocence, but to create a new chance. While Anakin, in his time, plunged deeper and deeper into anger at not finding answers, the Padmé of the future slowly began to see the abyss into which the love of her life had fallen. The journey that Darth Vader imposed on Padmé became, day after day, less of an escape and more of an emotional journey. She still didn't forgive him. She still carried the wound of a betrayed love in her eyes. But there was something new growing inside her. The realization of the overwhelming pain that existed beneath that armor. With each portal they passed through, each fragment of the past revealed before her eyes, Padmé stopped seeing only the monster and began to see the man she had once loved, now suffocated by choices, fear, and regret. As much as she refused to admit it, she knew she was standing before Anakin, or what was left of him. Amidst the fog of emotion, Padmé finally confronted him. What happened to you, Anakin? How did you become this? Vader did not answer immediately. The force around them seemed to weigh tons. When he finally spoke, his voice faltered. I tried to prevent your death, I dreamed of it every night. Palpatine took advantage of my fear. I wanted to save you, Padmé." She stepped back, stunned, staring at the ground. The silence between them was more deafening than any scream. And yet, deep in her heart, something compelled her to try to understand. "You destroyed everything because you were afraid of losing me?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Yes," he replied, and for the first time he sounded like Anakin. There, in that suspended moment, the most unlikely moment of all occurred. Vader, without saying a word, reached for the side of his mask. With a subtle click, the lock turned. He removed part of the visor, just enough to reveal his left eye and part of his burned face. The skin was twisted, scarred by the fires of Mustafar, and the gaze, that crystal blue gaze, was now a broken reflection of the boy she had known on Tatooine. Padmé recoiled instinctively, but not in horror. It was compassion, pain, pure sadness. You're alive in there," she said, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Vader looked away, ashamed. For a moment he seemed fragile, human, vulnerable. The armor that once commanded fear now seemed like a burden. A prison he had chosen for himself because he didn't know how to deal with grief and failure. Padmé slowly approached, hesitant, and touched his exposed cheek with her fingertips. The skin was warm, alive. "If only I had known," she whispered. "If only you had let me try." Vader pulled her hand away, as if he didn't deserve the gesture, but the touch had already left its mark. Vader finally felt that he had accomplished what he needed to do. Padmé understood now, not everything, but enough. And that was enough. If she returned to her time now, perhaps she would have the strength to prevent the young Anakin from falling into darkness. Perhaps she could change what seemed inevitable. He no longer needed her for himself. He didn't want her. For the first time in years, his motivation was not possession but restoration. "You must go back," he said, standing before the greenish glow of the newly opened portal. Padmé hesitated, but she trusted him. They both crossed the veil and reappeared in their royal chambers, exactly where it had all begun. The atmosphere was thick, almost as if time had stopped breathing. Padmé still touched her belly, feeling the same life pulsing inside her, but everything was different. Before she could fully orient herself, a loud crash was heard, and there he was, the young Anakin Skywalker. His eyes were furious, his posture combative, the force boiling around his body. He had spent days in despair, weeks searching for her in every corner of Coruscant, until he realized that only there could she reappear. He waited silently, sleeping on the floor, barely eating, consumed by rage. And now, seeing her emerge accompanied by that dark creature, he exploded in a roar and activated his lightsaber to attack while shouting, "What have you done to her?" With no time for explanations, Vader activated his lightsaber and raised his hand to block the first blow. Anakin came like lightning, driven by youth, fear, and hatred. The lightsabers collided with a deafening sound, generating sparks that ricocheted off the walls of the room. The Force trembled. Vader tried to disarm the young man with defensive moves, using shoves and deflections with the Force, but each of Anakin's attacks came fiercer than the last. The boy's speed was almost inhuman, fueled by raw emotion. Vader blocked as best he could, but his stance was heavier, his body more worn. With each step, he retreated. With each blow, he felt not only the physical force, but the weight of the decisions that had brought him there. The confrontation became a whirlwind of lights. Anakin spun his lightsaber as he had in the golden days, jumping, attacking from above, from below, with variations that defied logic. Vader counterattacked brutally when necessary, but never aimed for lethal points. He did not want to kill the young man. Still, he was hit in the leg, fell, rose with the Force, and threw objects from the room which were destroyed by quick cuts. Padmé screamed in despair. She tried to intervene. She begged. She called Anakin's name, stretched out her arms, but neither of them heard her. It was as if the room had disconnected from reality. Versions of the same man faced each other, not only with sabers, but with the guilt, fear, and arrogance that defined them. "Anakin, stop. He's... you." But the words dissolved into the air, drowned out by the sound of blades and Force explosions. She backed away, leaning against the wall, protecting her children in her womb. It was no longer just fear for her body. It was dread for the fate that was unfolding before her eyes, a fate that perhaps could not be avoided. In a moment of openness, Anakin struck a precise blow, not to kill, but to wound, and his blade struck the side of Vader's face, destroying part of the mask. The charred metal broke and fell to the floor with a sharp crack. On the exposed side was the burned and twisted face of a broken man. Vader did not hesitate. He removed the rest of the mask with his own hands, allowing the young man to see what awaited him. The physical wounds, but mainly the empty gaze, marked by years of loneliness. "Look at me," he said in a raspy voice, without electronic modulation. "This is what you will become." Anakin hesitated for the first time. The saber trembled in his hand. Vader advanced slowly, saber down, breathing heavily. "I killed everyone out of fear, out of pride. And when I realized what I had done, it was too late." Palpatine lied. He always lied. "You can still stop." But Anakin didn't listen. The saber rose. Tears streamed down his young face. The Force stirred like a storm. He screamed, blade at high speed, and lunged for the final blow. Then Padmé's voice cut through the air like a silent thunderclap. "Anakin!" The cry was not one of fear. It was one of love. "Stop. Remember what you wanted to protect. It was me. It was us." The emotional impact was immediate. Anakin froze. His eyes widened. The saber stopped inches from Vader's exposed neck. Padmé rushed to Anakin as soon as she saw him hesitate. Her hands touched his firmly, even with the lightsaber still activated between them. "Anakin, this is not how you fight for love. Killing does not prevent pain. If you do this, if you kill him, you will be killing yourself." Anakin tried to look at her, but his eyes were still fixed on Vader, who was lying on the ground, breathing heavily, waiting for the final blow. It was then that Padmé turned to the wounded man and, her voice breaking, said, "Look at him. Look into his eyes. See who you're going to become." And for the first time, Anakin really looked. The silence of that moment was almost sacred. Vader's eyes, though burned and filled with sadness, were open. He was no longer resisting. He was just waiting. Vader was ready to receive the final blow. But when Anakin saw that, he saw his own reflection in the fallen figure, and the lightsaber fell from his hand with a soft clink. He fell to his knees, covered his face with his hands, and cried, This can't be who I am." Padmé embraced him from behind, and he shrank like a frightened child. The fear that had guided him there began to fade, replaced by something more difficult but more real: regret. Darth Vader, his voice weak, looked at the two of them and whispered, "I was wrong for so many years, and you can change that. I am no longer needed. The future is yours." He tried to stand up, but faltered. In his fist, the temporal device began to vibrate unsteadily. Time was running out. He knew he wouldn't last much longer there. He turned to Padmé and stared at her. "Forgive me, not for what I did, but for everything I didn't do." Then he turned his eyes back to Anakin. "Don't be me." With effort, Vader activated the device and opened the last portal. A tear of light that revealed the temple of Lothal, silent and untouched. He took a step inside, turned once more, and with a trembling hand, closed the passage and disappeared like smoke. The echo of the Force that remained in him vanished in that instant, like a wave receding never to return. He didn't just leave that timeline. He ceased to exist. Anakin stood silently. Padmé stared at where the portal had been, still feeling the weight of that farewell. But one thing was certain: they were no longer alone. They had received a warning from the future, and they would not ignore it. When they told the Jedi Council everything they had seen and learned, they were met with disbelief and resistance. But Padmé, with her political clout as a senator, and Anakin, with his Jedi courage, pressed on until the Masters could no longer deny it. With the approval of Mace Windu and Yoda, a task force was assembled. As many Jedi as possible were sent on a silent mission to the Chancellor's quarters. There would be no more hesitation. This time, they would not wait for power to corrupt everything. Palpatine had to be unmasked. The fight in the office was fierce. Palpatine, shrouded in shadows, unleashed bolts of energy that shattered the walls. Illusions dominated the room. Images of Jedi attacking each other, whispered words of betrayal, manipulation of the truth. But the Masters fought side by side, sabers crossing in the air in unison. He tried to escape. He tried to lie. He tried to invoke fear. But surrounded by so many, his speed and tricks were not enough. A coordinated strike by Mace and Obi-Wan disarmed the Sith, and Yoda immobilized him. Palpatine fell, defeated not by power, but by unity. Arrested, exposed, and stripped of all titles, Palpatine was brought to public trial. The evidence gathered, combined with the testimonies of Padmé and Anakin, was indisputable. The Senate voted unanimously to remove him from office. He would be held in permanent custody, never to have access to the Force again. In his place, the Senate elected Padmé Amidala as the new Chancellor. Her wisdom and courage had saved the galaxy from a dark fate, and everyone knew it. War did not break out. The Republic did not fall. The cycle was broken, and the years passed. On the terrace of the Jedi Temple, with the sky of Coruscant clear for the first time in weeks, Anakin and Padmé gazed at the horizon, hand in hand. In the background, the twins grew up healthy and happy. "Do you think Vader, still exists somewhere?" she asked. Anakin shook his head serenely. "I don't think so. I think he finally found peace." Padmé smiled sadly, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. So that's what he wanted. His end, and the beginning of ours. The scars of time would never be forgotten, but now they served as reminders of where they must never return. Peace was fragile but real. The Jedi Council was rebuilding. The galaxy breathed, and in the hearts of two lovers who had faced everything, time, pain, war, and destiny, love survived. The future, for the first time in a long time, was promising. And the memory of Darth Vader, not as a monster, but as a warning and a sacrifice, would live on only in the memories of those who chose not to repeat his mistakes.